welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to carry on with the brewing terms, and we're starting off with the letter M, and what I've chosen for M is mash. Now you may hear people, brewers, home brewing, people just drinking beer in the pub say about the mash. What's the mash? So the mash is basically the part of the process where you have your grain bill, your grist, and you put it into a liquor, the water, at a certain temperature. Different temperatures determine what you're going to get from that mash. So the whole idea of the mash really is to gain fermentable sugars from the grain. So the grain has been crushed to, it could be a fine crush, it could be a medium crush, or do that through a grain mill, and then the process starts. So for me, I'm normally mashing temperature between 64, 68, 64 degrees. I'm going to get a more fermentable wort, so it's going to be a bit of possibly a drier beer. The alcohol content could be higher because there's more sugars for the yeast to eat. When I ferment at a higher temperature, 68, 69, it's going to get more body because it's going to leave some of them long chain sugars which the yeast finds more difficult to eat. So a lot of that will stay within the beer at the end. So you'll get a lower ABV but a bigger body. Now if you want to get medium body, you're best off sticking to around about 66 degrees for a medium body brew, 64, even 63 for a drier beer, higher alcohol content drier beer, and then up to 70 if you want a full body beer with less alcohol content. Okay, so that's M, that's mash. So the mash is the grain into the hot liquor, and then you're getting what sugars you can for fermenting for the yeast. The next one is N, noble hops. Now noble hops, there's 4 varieties, and it's European traditional varieties. Those are Hallertau, I hope I'm saying these right, Saaz, Spalt, never use Spalt, and Tettnang. So they're the 4 varieties. The European, basically German and Czech varieties, traditionally used for brewing like pilsners and continental lagers. So if someone says noble hops, more than likely they're talking about them 4 varieties from European countries of Germany and the Czech. Okay. So O for oxidised. So basically, if you hear someone say, "Oh, my beer, I think it's been oxidised," or "Oh, it tastes a bit like it's got some oxygen in the beer," or "Oh, this beer's oxidised, so it looks a bit murky." When I say murky, imagine a New England IPA and how bright yellow they normally are, orange colours, bright colours. If it's been oxidised any point, basically after the boil, no, not after the boil, sorry, after fermentation and in between fermentation, then the oxygen within the beer starts to deteriorate the beer. It can dull hops, it can make the beer go like a browny colour, which you normally want something bright. You can bring in winey flavours, sherry flavours, people say cardboard, paper, damp, it's just not nice. So that's a beer. Basically, after fermentation is the worst time you can get it, or just before it finishes fermenting, because hopefully the yeast that's still active during fermentation will eat up any oxygen. But when you start to transfer, or if you, after fermentation, you've got it in your fermenter, it falls over, could introduce oxygen again within the beer. Yeast will eat that as much as that's possible, or like if you've seen any of my other videos, I've got these oxygen scavenging caps. But, still don't know if they're working or not yet. I think so far I've tried 2 of the beers I've used and it seems to be working so far. But yeah, you really want to avoid oxygen after it's fermented. When you've done the boil and you cool your wort down, and just before you put the yeast in, you do want oxygen, so you shake it up, or if it's a bigger scale brewers, they put oxygen stones in, introducing oxygen, because that oxygen is what helps the yeast become active and get it going. So you need it at that point, but once it's fermented, you don't want oxygen. It can ruin your beer, especially if you're going into competitions with homebrews, or if you're in a pub, or if you buy a commercial beer or a can, you pour it out, you think it looks a bit brown, or the hops have faded, or you can taste the sherry. That beer's oxidised, so that's O, oxidised. And then finally, we've got P. Now, I think I've covered this slightly before, but this is priming. So priming basically means when you add sugar, a calculated amount of sugar, to the beer packaging. So for bottling, you've got a carbonation calculator. There's a few of them if you look online. So you put the measurement of your beers in litres, and then the temperature that's fermented at, and then it'll tell you how much sugar to add to basically get that conditioned. So bottle priming is the main one there. So priming is the process where you're adding sugar, maybe in a mixture of water, to the fermented beer, and then for the secondary fermentation to take place. Okay, so that's M, N, O and P. Okay, cheers for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.